The girl sat quietly in the back row of her classroom, doodling small stars on her notebook while her classmates laughed and talked around her. She wasn't the type who liked attention. Most days she just wanted to make it through without anyone noticing her. Her voice was soft, her presence even softer. But inside her heart there was something powerful, a love for music that she rarely showed to anyone. At home, when no one was around, she would hum little tunes to herself. She had an old radio that she kept on her desk, and sometimes she would turn it on late at night, singing quietly so no one could hear. Music made her feel safe. It was the only time she didn't feel shy or nervous. But the thought of singing in front of people terrified her. Just imagining all those eyes staring at her made her palms sweat. Her mother often heard her singing behind closed doors and would stop outside the room, listening quietly. The girl had a beautiful voice, clear, emotional, and honest. But whenever her mother mentioned it, she would blush and say, "It's nothing special." Her mother would smile and reply, "It's more special than you think." One morning at school, the loudspeaker crackled to life, announcing the annual talent show. It was something the whole school looked forward to every year. Students performed dances, skits, and songs. Some even told jokes or played instruments. Her best friend turned to her with excitement. "You should sign up," she said, her eyes bright. The girl's heart dropped. "Me? No way," she said quickly. "I can't sing in front of people." Her friend shook her head. "You have to. You're amazing and no one even knows it. This is your chance." But the girl just smiled awkwardly and looked down at her notebook again, pretending to be busy. The very thought of it made her stomach twist. That afternoon, as the students lined up in the hallway to go home, her friend quietly walked over to the sign-up sheet by the office. Without saying a word, she wrote her name down under the singing category and smiled mischievously. She didn't tell her right away. She wanted it to be a surprise. The next morning, when the teacher read out the list of participants, the girl froze. Her name was right there, now printed clearly for everyone to see. The class turned to look at her, whispering and smiling. "You're going to sing?" someone asked. She stammered, I guess so." Her heart raced. After class, she ran up to her friend and whispered angrily, "Why did you do that?" Her friend only laughed. "Because you'll never do it yourself. You need a push." That night, she couldn't sleep. The idea of standing on a stage made her feel sick with fear. She imagined herself forgetting the lyrics, her voice shaking, people laughing. The picture in her mind was unbearable. She rolled over in bed, staring at the ceiling, wishing she could just disappear before the talent show happened. The following days passed slowly. Posters went up around school, listing all the performers. People were already talking about who would win. Her name was there in big letters, reminding her of the moment that was coming closer with every sunrise. She started practicing secretly, humming quietly when no one was listening. But every time she thought about being on stage, her chest tightened. One evening, her mother found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her sheet of lyrics. "What's wrong?" her mother asked softly. "You look like you're carrying the whole world on your shoulders." The girl sighed. "I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I'll just make a fool of myself." Her mother sat beside her and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sweetheart," she said, "you've been singing since you could talk. I've seen you light up when you sing. That's not something you should hide. You don't have to be perfect, just be yourself." Tears filled the girl's eyes. "But what if they laugh at me?" she whispered. Her mother smiled sadly. "People will always have opinions. But what matters most is how you feel about yourself. You don't need to impress anyone. You just need to be brave enough to try." That night, her mother stayed up with her, helping her practice. They started with small humming exercises, then moved to singing quietly. With each verse, her voice grew stronger. For the first time, she felt a flicker of confidence. Maybe, just maybe, she could do it. The day of the talent show arrived sooner than she wanted. The school auditorium was buzzing with energy. Parents filled the seats, chatting and laughing. Students backstage were adjusting costumes, tuning guitars, and rehearsing last-minute lines. The air was full of excitement and tension. She stood near the curtain, clutching her microphone, her hands trembling. She could feel her heartbeat pounding in her chest. "You okay?" her friend whispered beside her. She nodded, but her voice cracked when she said, "I think I might faint." Her friend grinned. "You won't. You're going to be amazing. Just remember, it's not about them. It's about you and your song." As she waited, she peeked through a small gap in the curtain. The crowd looked endless, rows and rows of faces. Some she recognized, others she didn't. Her teacher sat near the front with a warm smile, giving her a little thumbs up. The principal stood by the microphone, introducing each act with enthusiasm. One performer after another went on, a dance group, a comedy act, a magician. The audience clapped and cheered. Each round of applause made her more nervous. Her throat felt dry, her palms slick with sweat. She wanted to run away. She wanted to go home, hide under her blanket, and forget this ever happened. Then she heard it. Her name, called out loud, clear and cheerful. "Next up, we have a special performance from one of our students. Let's welcome her to the stage." The room erupted in applause. She froze. Her friend squeezed her hand. "Go," she whispered. "You've got this." With shaky legs, she stepped out from behind the curtain. The bright lights hit her face, and for a second she couldn't see anything but white. The noise of the crowd faded into a muffled hum. She could feel every heartbeat echo in her ears. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. She walked to the center of the stage, holding the microphone so tightly her knuckles turned white. She could barely hear the faint music cue start behind her. Every fear she'd ever had came rushing back at once. What if her voice cracked? What if people laughed? What if she just stood there, frozen? But then, she remembered her mother's voice from the night before. "You don't have to be perfect, and just be yourself." She took one more deep breath, closed her eyes, and let the first note leave her lips. The sound came out quiet, soft and uncertain, like a whisper carried by the wind. For a moment, no one moved. But as the melody began to fill the air, something inside her shifted. She could feel the music moving through her chest, spreading warmth through her trembling body. Her voice steadied. She sang the next line louder, clearer. Her voice echoed through the auditorium, reaching the back rows. The crowd went silent, no whispers, no laughter, just stillness. Her nervousness didn't vanish completely, but it began to fade into something else. Focus, passion, release. Each word she sang carried a piece of her heart, a piece she had always kept hidden. She wasn't thinking about the audience anymore. She was thinking about all the nights she sang alone in her room, all the times she wished she had the courage to be seen. Right there on that stage, she was no longer the shy girl from the back of the class. She was someone brave, someone alive. When the song ended, there was a brief pause, a quiet heartbeat of disbelief. And then, the crowd erupted into applause so loud it made her jump. For a moment she stood frozen again, this time in awe. People were cheering, clapping, whistling. Her teacher was smiling. Her mother had tears in her eyes, and her friend was on her feet, cheering louder than anyone. She couldn't believe it. All the fear, all the doubt, it melted away. What she felt now was pure, simple joy. She took a small bow, her face glowing, and walked off the stage still trembling. But this time from excitement, not fear. Behind the curtain, her friend ran up and hugged her tightly. "You did it!" she shouted. The girl laughed, her eyes shining. "I actually did it," she whispered back. For the first time in her life, she felt proud, not because people clapped for her, but because she had faced her biggest fear and found her courage. That night, when she got home, she sat by her window and looked up at the stars. Her voice still echoed softly in her ears. She smiled to herself, realizing that this was just the beginning, the first step of something much bigger than she could have imagined. The sound of applause still echoed in her ears as she walked off the stage that night. She could still feel her heart beating fast, but now it wasn't from fear, it was from excitement. She had done it. The girl who had always avoided attention had stood under the bright lights and sung in front of everyone. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. As she made her way through the hallway, students stopped her to say how amazing she was. Some just smiled, others clapped her on the shoulder and said, "You were incredible." She didn't know how to respond. She just smiled shyly, her cheeks warm. Inside, though, something new was growing, a quiet kind of confidence she had never felt before. Her mother met her outside the auditorium. She had tears in her eyes, but was smiling so brightly that her daughter couldn't help but smile back. She opened her arms and they hugged tightly. "I'm so proud of you," her mother whispered. "You were beautiful up there." For a moment, the girl couldn't even speak. She just held onto her mother and let the feeling sink in. The relief, the joy, the disbelief that it was all real. When they got home, she went straight to her room and sat on her bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. It almost felt like she was looking at someone else, someone braver. Her old self would never have dared to do what she had just done. She remembered how scared she'd been, how she almost backed out, but she didn't, and now her whole world felt different. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of the stage, the lights, the faces in the crowd, the feeling of her voice filling the room. It was like reliving a dream over and over again. She didn't want it to end. The next morning, she woke up to find her phone buzzing with messages. Her friends had posted clips from her performance online. People were commenting things like, "Who is she? She's amazing. And I got chills listening to this." Some even shared it further, tagging their friends. Within a few hours, the video had hundreds of views. She didn't know whether to feel excited or terrified. The idea of strangers hearing her sing made her nervous all over again. But at the same time, it felt wonderful to know that her voice had reached people who didn't even know her name. When she got to school, the atmosphere felt different. Normally, she would slip quietly to her seat and no one would notice. But that day, everyone seemed to notice. As she walked down the hallway, students waved and smiled. Some of the younger ones even whispered to each other, pointing at her. She had never been the center of attention before, and it felt strange. A little uncomfortable, but also kind of special. During lunch, she sat with her best friend, who couldn't stop talking. "Do you realize how good you were?" she said. "Everyone's talking about you. Even the teachers." The girl laughed nervously. "You're exaggerating," she said. But her friend shook her head. "No, I'm serious. You blew everyone away." Later that day, her music teacher called her to the classroom after school. She walked in, nervous again for some reason, and found the teacher smiling warmly at her. "I just wanted to say," the teacher began, "what you did yesterday was extraordinary. You have a gift, one you shouldn't hide." The girl looked down, blushing. "Thank you," she said softly. The teacher continued, "Have you ever thought about joining the school choir? Or maybe performing at local events? There's a festival next month and they're looking for young singers." The suggestion made her heart skip a beat. Performing again? She wasn't sure if she was ready for that. "I don't know," she admitted. "I still get nervous." The teacher smiled gently. "Everyone does. But that's how you grow. Fear means you're about to do something brave." Those words stayed with her as she walked home that afternoon. Fear means you're about to do something brave. It echoed in her mind, mixing with memories of the applause and the way her voice had carried through the hall. Maybe she wasn't fearless, but maybe she didn't have to be. That evening, as she sat by her window with her notebook, she began to write down song ideas, little lines that came to her, pieces of emotions she had never shared. Some were happy, some sad, but all of them were real. Music had always been her way of expressing what she couldn't say out loud, and now she felt ready to let those feelings breathe. Her best friend came over the next day, bringing snacks and excitement as always. "Guess what?" she said. "My cousin saw your video online and sent it to me, not even knowing it was you." They both laughed. It was surreal. Something she did out of fear had suddenly become something people were talking about everywhere. Over the next few weeks, life began to settle again, but in a new way. The girl still sat in the back of class, still preferred quiet moments, but now people looked at her differently. Teachers smiled when they saw her. Classmates who never spoke to her before suddenly said hello. She didn't become loud or proud. She didn't want fame. But she walked a little taller, talked a little more, and smiled a lot easier. Then one afternoon, her teacher stopped her in the hallway. "The community center is hosting a spring concert," she said. "Would you like to perform?" The girl froze. She hadn't expected another chance so soon. I don't know," she said slowly. "That's a lot of people." The teacher smiled. "Yes, but it's also a lot of hearts waiting to hear something beautiful. Think about it." For the rest of the day, she couldn't stop thinking about it. Part of her wanted to say no, to stay safe and quiet. But another part, and the part that remembered the feeling of the crowd, the joy of singing, wanted to say yes. That night, she told her mother about the offer. Her mother smiled softly. "You already know what your heart wants," she said. So she said yes. From that moment on, the days leading up to the performance felt both exciting and terrifying. She practiced every night, this time with more confidence. Her mother sat in the living room while she sang, sometimes recording her on her phone. Even when she made mistakes, they laughed together. There were moments when doubt crept back in. She'd stop mid-song and sigh. What if I can't do it again? She'd ask, what if the first time was just luck? Her mother would smile. Luck doesn't make people feel what they felt that night, she'd say. That was you. That came from your heart. The day of the spring concert arrived. It was held outdoors at the community park, with a small stage and rows of chairs. Families brought blankets and snacks. Kids ran around and the air smelled like popcorn and flowers. The girl stood backstage holding her microphone again, the same nervous flutter returning to her stomach. Her best friend was there too, cheering her on like always. You're gonna do great, she said, squeezing her hand. Remember how scared you were last time? And then you blew everyone away. You can do this again. When her turn came, she stepped out under the soft evening sky. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of pink and gold. For a moment, she looked out at the faces in the crowd, not as strangers, but as people who might need the same hope she once needed. She smiled softly and began to sing. This time, there was no shaking in her voice, no hesitation. Each word flowed naturally, full of warmth and emotion. The breeze carried her song through the park. Children stopped playing. Conversations faded. People turned and listened. She sang not just for them, but for the frightened version of herself who once believed she couldn't. And when the last note hung in the air, the applause came again, loud, long, and full of love. She bowed slightly, her cheeks glowing. As she walked off the stage, her heart felt light, as if she'd just set something free. That night, lying in bed, she thought about everything that had happened, how one small act of courage had changed so much. She realized that fear might never fully go away, but neither would her love for music. The two would always walk side by side, teaching her balance. And though she didn't know it yet, that spring performance would open even more doors, chances she never imagined, and moments that would test her heart again. But for now, she smiled to herself, content with the simple truth that she had found her voice, and it was stronger than her fear. After the spring concert, everything around her began to change in small but meaningful ways. People in the community started recognizing her, the quiet girl who sang at the park and made everyone stop to listen. Some would wave when they saw her at the grocery store or smile when she passed by. She wasn't used to attention, but it didn't scare her anymore. Instead, it felt like she was slowly becoming part of something bigger than herself. The video of her performance at the park spread online too, just like the one from her school talent show. This time it reached even more people. Comments poured in, full of kind words and encouragement. This voice feels like peace, one person wrote. She sings like she's telling a story straight from her heart, said another. She read every message quietly at night, sometimes with tears in her eyes, not out of sadness but from disbelief that her voice could touch so many strangers. At school, her teachers began to encourage her to keep performing. Her music teacher, who had believed in her from the beginning, helped her sign up for a local youth music competition that brought together talented students from across the city. It wasn't something she would have ever imagined herself doing, but deep inside she wanted to see how far she could go. When she told her mother about it, her mother smiled softly. You see what happens when you follow your heart, she said. One small moment of courage can open doors you never knew existed. The girl nodded, her heart full. She knew she was still shy and easily nervous, but she also knew that her love for music was stronger than her fear. The day of the competition came faster than she expected. It was held in a big hall downtown, much larger than her school auditorium or the park stage. When she first walked in, her breath caught. The stage lights looked brighter, the audience seats seemed endless, and the energy in the room was electric. All around her were other contestants warming up, some with guitars, others with pianos or violins. She felt small again, like that shy girl who once sang only in her room. She sat quietly in a corner, clutching her sheet music. Her heart thudded in her chest. Doubts began creeping in. What if I'm not good enough? What if the judges don't like me? What if I forget the words? She tried to shake the thoughts away, but they grew louder. Her music teacher noticed her sitting alone and came over. You're nervous, the teacher said kindly. That's good. It means you care. She looked up, surprised. Good? It doesn't feel good. The teacher smiled. You'll learn that nervousness and excitement come from the same place. You just have to let it turn into energy. The teacher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Remember why you started singing. Not for trophies, not for attention. You sing because it makes you feel alive. Do that today and the rest will follow. She nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. The advice stayed in her mind as she waited for her turn. When the announcer finally called her name, the same flutter of fear returned, but she walked toward the stage anyway. The lights hit her again. Bright, warm, blinding. Just like before. The hall went quiet. For a second, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then the soft music began to play. Her voice started gentle and low, just a whisper at first. But as she sang, she remembered all the moments that had brought her there. The nights she practiced in her room. The trembling hands during her first performance. The support of her mother and the words of her teacher. All of it poured into her song. By the time she reached the chorus, she was no longer singing to impress anyone. She was singing because she couldn't keep it inside anymore. Her voice filled the hall, wrapping around every seat, touching every person listening. The judges leaned forward, captivated. Some audience members even closed their eyes, lost in the sound. When the final note faded, there was silence again. Then thunderous applause. She stood there for a moment, stunned. The sound of hundreds of people clapping for her felt like a wave washing over her. She smiled shyly and took a small bow before walking off stage, her heart still racing. Backstage, her teacher hugged her. You did it, they said, their eyes shining with pride. No matter what the results are, you've already won. When the winners were announced later that evening, she didn't expect her name to be called. But it was. She had won second place. The crowd clapped again as she went up to receive her award, her hands shaking slightly as she accepted the small golden trophy. It wasn't about the prize, though. It was about what it meant. It meant that she belonged there. That night, she sat on her bed holding the trophy, turning it slowly in her hands. It wasn't flashy or big, but to her it felt like proof that she could do something she once thought impossible. As days passed, her confidence grew little by little. More opportunities began to appear. Local event organizers invited her to perform at small gatherings, charity programs, and community nights. Each stage she stepped on felt a little less frightening than the last. Each performance felt more natural, like she was finally becoming the person she was meant to be. Her mother attended every show, sitting in the front row, smiling proudly. After each one, she would hug her and say, "You were wonderful," even when the girl made small mistakes. Those words meant more than any applause could. But even with all the good things happening, she remained humble. She still helped around the house, studied hard, and spent quiet evenings by the window writing new songs in her notebook. She never thought of herself as famous or special. She just wanted to keep singing, to keep connecting with people through her music. One evening, while scrolling through her messages, she found one that made her stop. It was from a young girl who had watched her video online. The message said, "I used to be scared of singing too, but after seeing you, I decided to try. Thank you for giving me courage." Her eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined that her story could inspire someone else. She realized then that what she had done wasn't just about facing her own fear. It was about showing others that they could too. She wrote back, "Thank you for your message. I used to be scared too, but singing helped me believe in myself. If you love something, never stop trying. You'll find your moment too." That simple exchange stayed with her. It reminded her why music mattered, because it touched hearts, connected people, and gave them hope. A few weeks later, her school announced that she had been chosen to represent them in a regional showcase. It was one of the biggest events of the year, with schools from across the state participating. The thought of performing in front of such a large audience made her nervous again, but she didn't say no. She had learned that every new challenge was another chance to grow. She spent the following weeks preparing, practicing every evening after school. Sometimes her mother would listen and give gentle advice. Other times her best friend would sit beside her, helping her choose outfits and cheering her up when she felt unsure. There were nights she got frustrated when her voice cracked or she forgot lines, but she didn't give up. Finally, the day came. The showcase was held in a grand theater, bigger than anything she had seen before. The crowd was massive, the lights brighter than ever. She stood backstage again, microphone in hand, her heart racing just like it had the very first time. She whispered to herself, "You can do this," and walked out. The audience fell silent as she began to sing. This time, her nerves didn't control her. She felt them, yes, but she let them become part of the song, the tremble of emotion that made it real. Her voice rose and fell beautifully, carrying every feeling she'd ever held inside. When she finished, the theater erupted in applause once more. People stood clapping and cheering. She couldn't help but smile through tears. Each time she stepped on stage, it wasn't just about music anymore. It was about courage, about becoming the person she was always meant to be. That night, when she returned home, she placed her performance ribbon next to her small trophy. She didn't see them as prizes. She saw them as reminders of fear, of bravery, and of the strength that comes from believing in yourself even when you're scared. As she turned off the light and lay down to sleep, she felt a quiet peace in her heart. The world felt wide and full of possibilities, and somewhere deep inside she knew her journey was only beginning. After the big showcase, life began to move faster for her than it ever had before. People who had seen her perform that night kept talking about her performance for weeks. Teachers, students, even people from other schools reached out to congratulate her. What had once been a small dream inside her heart was now becoming something real, something bigger than she ever thought possible. She tried to keep her days normal. She still went to school, still studied, still spent quiet evenings with her mother, but there was something different about her now. She walked with more confidence, spoke with a bit more warmth, and smiled more often. The same girl who once avoided being noticed now carried herself like someone who had finally found her purpose. A few days after the showcase, her teacher called her to the office. There were a few people waiting there, 2 women from a local radio station who had heard about her from the event organizers. They wanted to invite her for an interview and maybe even have her sing live on air. The idea of being on the radio made her nervous again, but her teacher smiled at her and said softly, "You've already done harder things." That evening, she told her mother about it. Her mother's eyes lit up. "See," she said gently, "when you do what you love, the world starts opening doors for you." The girl nodded, her heart full of both excitement and fear. She didn't want to disappoint anyone. The day of the radio interview arrived and she woke up early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. She spent extra time choosing what to wear, finally settling on something simple, a plain blue dress that made her feel comfortable. When she arrived at the studio, the hosts welcomed her warmly. They asked her questions about her journey, about how she overcame her fear, and about what inspired her to sing. She answered honestly, her voice calm but humble. When they asked her to sing a song live, she hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The music started playing softly through her headphones. As soon as she began singing, the nerves melted away. Her voice filled the studio, pure and heartfelt. When the song ended, there was a brief silence before everyone started clapping. The host leaned forward and said, "That was absolutely beautiful. I think we all just got goosebumps." That night, when the interview aired, people across the city listened. Many called the station asking about her. Some even wanted to know where they could hear her sing again. Her name began to spread beyond her school and town. She didn't think of herself as famous, she didn't even like that word. But she was beginning to realize that her voice had the power to reach people far beyond what she could see. A few days later, she received an email from a small music organization that hosted events for young talent. They invited her to perform at a charity concert meant to raise funds for children's hospitals. She agreed immediately. It felt special to be part of something that helped others. She practiced every day after school, often in her living room while her mother cooked dinner in the background. Sometimes her mother would hum along and they would laugh when one of them missed a note. Those moments felt peaceful, reminders that no matter how much life changed, some things would always stay the same. When the night of the charity concert arrived, she looked out at the crowd before stepping on stage. The audience was filled with families, doctors, nurses, and children from the hospitals they were helping. It wasn't the biggest crowd she'd ever sung for, but it was the one that touched her heart the most. When she sang that night, her voice carried emotion in every word. She didn't just perform, she connected. Some people wiped away tears and others smiled softly, holding hands. The applause at the end wasn't wild or loud, but full of warmth and gratitude. Afterward, one of the parents came up to her with their little girl, who had been sitting in a wheelchair near the front row. The woman smiled and said, "You made her night. Thank you." The little girl looked up and said softly, "You sing like sunshine." Those simple words stayed with her long after the concert ended. She realized that music wasn't just about sound, it was about feelings, about making people believe again. Over the next few months, she continued to sing at small events, festivals, and school functions. Each time she learned something new, how to face bigger crowds, how to handle mistakes on stage, and how to stay grounded even when people praised her. She never let it change who she was. She still helped her mother at home, still studied hard, and still spent quiet time by herself when she needed peace. One afternoon, while she was walking home from school, her phone buzzed with a message from a music academy in another city. They had seen her videos online and wanted to offer her a scholarship for vocal training. She stopped in the middle of the street, staring at the screen in disbelief. The idea of leaving home scared her, but it also filled her with excitement. She couldn't believe how far she'd come. From a shy girl afraid to sing in front of her classmates to someone being offered a chance to study music professionally. That night, she sat at the kitchen table with her mother, showing her the email. Her mother read it slowly, her eyes glistening. "You deserve this," she said softly. "You worked hard for it. But remember, no matter where you go, don't forget who you are." The girl nodded, tears in her eyes. "I won't," she whispered. The following weeks were full of preparations, paperwork, packing, and goodbyes. Her best friend threw her a small farewell party at the park, where she had once sung for the first time. They laughed, shared memories, and promised to stay in touch no matter what. As the sun set, the girl looked at the stage in the distance and smiled. It felt like life had come full circle. When she arrived in the new city, everything felt unfamiliar. The streets, the people, even the air. The academy was much larger than she imagined, full of talented students from all over the country. On her first day, she stood in the hallway listening to other singers warming up. Their voices were strong, confident, and professional. For a moment, she felt small again, like she didn't belong. But then she reminded herself that she had earned her place there. She took a deep breath and walked into her first class. Her instructors were kind but strict. They pushed her to improve and to refine her breathing, control her tone, and find her unique sound. It was challenging, and some days she came back to her dorm tired and frustrated, but she never gave up. One evening, after a long day of rehearsals, she stood by the window of her small room, watching the city lights below. She thought about everything: her first performance, her mother's encouragement, her teacher's advice, the little girl who said she sang like sunshine. It all felt like a dream she was still living inside. She smiled softly, whispering to herself, "I'm really here." Months passed and her voice grew stronger, deeper, and more expressive. She began writing her own songs, inspired by the people she met and the memories she carried. One of her songs, a gentle melody about courage, was chosen for a student showcase at the academy. When she performed it, people listened in silence, moved by the sincerity in her voice. Afterward, one of the instructors told her, "You don't just sing notes, you tell stories." That's rare. It was the greatest compliment she could imagine. As she walked home that night, she realized something important. All the attention, the applause, the recognition. Those things were nice, but they weren't the reason she sang. She sang because it was her way of speaking to the world, her way of saying what words alone could never express. And even though her journey was still just beginning, she knew one thing for sure, and that nervous, shy girl who once trembled behind a microphone was still inside her. But now she wasn't afraid of her fear. She had learned how to walk beside it, how to turn it into strength. She closed her eyes, breathed in deeply, and smiled. Life had given her a gift. Not fame, not fortune, but the courage to share her heart. And that, she knew, was worth more than anything else. Time passed faster than she expected. The city that once felt so big and strange had started to feel like home. The sound of footsteps in the academy hallways, the soft hum of instruments in practice rooms, the late-night talks with other students, all of it had become part of her world. But somewhere inside her, she knew that one day she would have to go back home. It happened sooner than she thought. The academy was organizing a special event, a national showcase for young artists who had achieved something meaningful through their music. When her instructor told her that she had been chosen to represent the academy, she couldn't believe it. But what made her heart skip a beat was what came next. The event was being held in her hometown, the Thought of performing there again brought back a flood of memories. Her nervous hands gripping the microphone for the first time, her shaky voice filling the school hall, the surprised faces in the audience, and her mother's tearful smile. It felt like life was giving her a chance to return, not as the nervous teen who once doubted herself, but as someone who had learned to stand tall. The weeks leading up to the event were full of rehearsals and planning. She spent long hours practicing, making sure every note, every pause, every breath carried meaning. This wasn't just another performance, it was a homecoming, a thank you to everyone who had believed in her. When the day finally came, she boarded the train early in the morning. As the city buildings faded behind her, memories played like a film in her mind. Her mother's laughter, her teacher's gentle encouragement, the park where she once sang for a small crowd. She pressed her forehead against the window and smiled softly. She wasn't the same girl who had left. She had grown, not just as a singer, but as a person. When the train stopped at her hometown station, the familiar smell of fresh air and street food filled her senses. Everything looked smaller than she remembered, yet full of warmth. Her mother was waiting for her near the exit, holding a small bouquet of flowers. They hugged tightly, neither saying much, just holding on as if words would only get in the way. That night, as she sat in her old room, she looked around at the posters still hanging on the walls, in the small mirror she used to practice in front of. Everything was just as she had left it, yet she felt so different inside. She picked up her old notebook, the one filled with lyrics and doodles, and smiled when she saw her handwriting from years ago. At the bottom of one page she had written, "One day I'll sing without fear." And now that day had come. The next morning the venue was buzzing with activity. The event was being held in the same auditorium where she had first performed years ago. It looked bigger now, filled with lights, cameras, and banners. People from all over the town had come, students, teachers, and even strangers who remembered the story of the shy girl who once surprised everyone. She felt her heart race as she stood backstage. The sounds of other performers drifted through the curtains. Her turn was next. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered to herself, "This is for everyone who never stopped believing in me." When her name was announced, she took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit her face, warm and bright. For a moment she looked out into the crowd and saw familiar faces. Her mother in the front row, her teacher sitting beside her, and a few classmates who waved with wide smiles. She smiled back. The music began, soft and steady. Her song that night was one she had written herself. A song about finding courage in silence, about turning fear into strength, about learning to speak through music when words aren't enough. Her voice filled the room, calm and full of emotion. Every word came from her heart. As she sang, something magical happened. The audience went completely still. No one whispered, no one moved, they just listened. Her voice carried not just melody but the story of a journey, a story of a girl who had once been too scared to speak but had now found her voice. When the song ended, there was a long moment of silence before the crowd erupted in applause. People stood up, clapping, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Her mother stood too, her hands pressed over her heart. The host came up and asked her to say a few words. She took the microphone again, her hands steady this time. "A few years ago," she began softly, "I stood right here, afraid, unsure, and convinced I didn't belong. But that night changed my life, because that's when I learned something. Fear doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you care enough to try. And sometimes that's all you need."